Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's News Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida, and today's date is Wednesday, March 30th, 2016. Yeah, man, this is 1 year is so confoundedly quick. I'm like, oh my goodness. And it's like you want to do some more time, and do some more achievements, hit some bumps on the road, but you know what? Think about it. You're alive. You're breathing. You got people that love you all over. You're pretty darn blessed. So can't make any complaints. Yeah, so I was scoping out a few things, and one thing that got my attention was checking out this YouTube channel on Pete Santilli. It's in reference to the Bundy Ranch hearings, which is going to be happening in a couple of months. I'll probably say like late January, early February, with the federal courts. And I think her name is Deborah Jordan. She made a lot of controversies and a lot of gaps in this particular case. And she addressed about the corruption in Nevada with the prosecutors, the cops, and the judges and so forth. And on the federal level, they're trying to push everything and try to keep everything under a tight lid. They try to do gag orders on the hearings because I believe, based on what she described the case, this includes Pete Santilli as well, is that they're really desperate because they believe they're not gonna if it goes a little bit, have some profile, like some of the information, the basics, without bringing it all in its entirety, can really jeopardize this case. Plus, we all know too, a lot, like, it's too obvious, especially on property rights and all that. Well, I'm gonna put that link on there just to let you guys see it. It'll be like maybe in my footnotes for sure. It'll be like the bottom to the last with the music credits, and you can check it out yourself. And there's a very interesting, synopsis she has. And Pete Santilli, he's like focused as well. And there's even a report too that one of the Bundy sons was taking photos of the agents, and they gave him a hard time, and they took him from the ranch to Las Vegas and dropped them off in the middle of nowhere in Las Vegas. But yeah, this is going to be one interesting case that people really need to focus on, because if this actual trial goes one way or the other, a big message will be sent. So everyone needs to really pay attention. Remember, they did stuff in the past. The Feds got away with a lot of crap, a lot of tyranny, and now is blowing back in their faces. And we have to make sure, and even with the case, they have to have merit to convict without beyond a reasonable doubt. So keep your thoughts and prayers and blessings towards these individuals. And so keep you posted, but I will add this to my footnotes for sure. It'll say Bundy Ranch trial update. And it's actually done by Deborah Jordan. So, and like it says here, the real showdown with the BLM is about to begin. We'll just see how many informants are involved, and of course, how much lies or deceits the federal government use against them. Hey, they tried to use that with the Mahler 7, right? They got 15 informants, and when they go and only 3 testify. Oh, we can't get the rest of them to testify because they heard our calls. And of course, the jury getting a big middle finger and not guilty. Jury nullification works, my friends. Remember that. So, all right. So, us be enough of those areas. So the first thing it'll be a few things. It'll be 5 things. Not that long. Because I'm just on a little bit on a run here. So the first thing I want to be checking out is by counterpunch.org. And it says here, the CIA and the press. When the Washington Post ran the CIA's propaganda network. It is by... Who is this by? Hold on here. I always get these messed up. Man, I'm like terrible at memory here at times, yeah? Jeffrey St. Clair, and Alexander Cockburn. All right. And as it reads here, I'll just go back here. As it reads here, last week the Washington Post published a scurrilous piece by a heretofore obscure technology reporter named Craig Timberg. I'm not related by any means, all right? Alleging without the faintest evidence that Russian intelligence was using more than 200 independent news sites to pump out pro-Putin and anti-Clinton propaganda during the election campaign. Under the breathless headline, Russia propaganda effort helped spread fake news during the election, experts say. Sounds like, of course, Operation Mockingbird, right? Timberg concocted his story based on allegations from a vaporous group called Propornot, run by nameless individuals of unknown origin whom Timberg, cribbing from the Bob Woodward-style sheet, agreed to quote as the anonymous sources. Propornot's catalog of supposed Putin-controlled outlets reeks of the McCarthyite smears of the Red Scare era. The blacklist includes some of the most esteemed alternative news sites on the web, including Antiwar.com, Black Agenda Report, Truthdig, Naked Capitalism, Consortium News, Truthout, LouRockwell.com, Global Research, Unis.com, Zero Hedge, and yes, Counterpunch, among many others. I'll have more on Timberg and Propornot in my Friday column. It's funny because I subscribe to these guys too. Of course, a bunch of us we follow one another, so that's pretty cool. But it's like the same old song and dance, right? Okay, you know how that goes. Blame games, everyone but you. Okay, so I'm going to continue on here. In the meantime, here is a brief historical note on how, at the height of the Cold War, the CIA developed its very own stable of writers, editors, and publishers, swelling to as many as 3,000 individuals that it paid to scribble agency propaganda under a program called Operation Mockingbird. The disinformation network was supervised by the late Philip Graham, former publisher of Timberg's very own paper, The Washington Post. Craig Timberg's story, which was about substantial as anonymous slurs scrawled by on a bathroom stall, lends to rise to the suspicion that the Post may still be a player in the same old game if perfected in the 1950s and continued across the decades, culminating in its 1966 hatchet job on my old friend Gary Webb and his immaculate reporting on drug running by the CIA-backed Contras in the 1980s. The Post discussing assaults on Webb was spearheaded in part by the paper's intelligence reporter Walter Pincus, himself an old CIA hand. For Timberg, there was probably just another day at the office. Fling some red slurs on the wall and see what sticks before moving on to his next big tech scoop, courtesy of hot tips from a couple of anonymous teenagers in Cupertino on software glitches in the iPhone 7 for the subjects of hit-and-run journalism such as this. However, it's often on a different matter entirely. In Webb's case, the Post's deplorable and baseless attacks killed his career as an investigative reporter and sparked a spiraling depression that ended with Gary taking his own life. Although the CIA's own Inspector General, Frederick Hitz, later confirmed Webb's reporting, the Post never retracted its slanderous stories or apologized for ruining the life of one of the country's finest, most courageous journalists. Now appears that the paper is circling around for yet another drive-by. Almost from its founding in 1947, the CIA had journalists on its payroll, a fact acknowledged in ringing tones by the agency in its announcement in 1976 when G.H.W. Bush took over from William Colby that effective immediately the CIA will not enter into any paid or contract relationship with any full-time or part-time news correspondent accredited by the U.S. News Service newspaper, periodical, radio, or television network or station. Though the announcement also stressed that the CIA would continue to welcome the voluntary unpaid cooperation of journalists, there is no reason to believe that the agency stopped convert payoffs to the Fourth Estate. Its practice in this regard before 1976 had been documented to a certain degree. In 1977, Carl Bernstein attacked the subject in Rolling Stone, concluding that more than 400 journalists had maintained some sort of alliance with the agency between 1956 and 1972. In 1977, the son of a well-known CIA senior man in the agency's earlier years said emphatically, though off the record, to a counterpuncher that, of course, the powerful and malevolent columnist Joseph Alsop was on the payroll. Press manipulation was always a paramount concern of the CIA, as with the Pentagon. In his Secret History of the CIA, published in 2001, Joe Trento described how 1948 CIA man Frank Wisner was appointed director of this Office of Special Projects, soon renamed the Office of Policy Coordination, or OPC. This became the Espionage and Counterintelligence Branch of the Central Intelligence Agency. The very first in this list of designated functions was propaganda, exercising Edward Bernays' playbook, right? That's my statement. Later that year, Wisner set an Operation Codename Mockingbird to influence the domestic American press. He recruited Philip Graham of the Washington Post to run the project within the industry. Trento writes that one of the most important journalists under the control of Operation Mockingbird was Joseph Alsop, whose article appeared in over 300 different newspapers. Other journalists willing to promote the views of the CIA include Stuart Alsop, New York Herald Tribune, Ben Bradley, Newsweek, James Reston, New York Times, Charles Douglas Jackson, Time Magazine, Walter Pincus, Washington Post, William C. Bragg, Miami News, which is now defunct, Herb Gold, Miami News, and Charles Bartlett, Chattanooga Times. By 1953, Operation Mockingbird had a major influence over 25 newspapers and wire agencies, including New York Times, Time, CBS, Time. They did it twice. Good grief. Wise's operations were funded by siphoning of funds intended for the Marshall Plan. Some of this money was used to bribe journalists and publishers. In his book, Mockingbird, the subversion of the free press by the CIA, Alex Constantine writes that in the 1950s, some 3,000 salaried and contract CIA employees were eventually engaged in propaganda efforts. Wow, man. And now that's why they are so infuriated with the independent news sites like the ones that I addressed aforementioned, and many others. It is really interesting on what's really going on. You should check these sites out. And even LouRockwell.com is awesome. I always like this time. If you heard my shows in the past, I love the narrative stuff. There's some great information out there. Remember to always observe responsibly. That's what the name of the game is, my friends. And if the CIA and the big networks are mad, then it has to be good, because all these years of brainwashing, conning people has been deteriorating. Blowback, that's the CIA terminology. Is blown back in their faces, and we have to keep plugging away. So everyone out there can be a journalist, okay? You can do your own show. You can interview folks. That's what's been happening thanks to the internet. Many great individuals are out there putting their necks out. So a lot of them are not making money off this, okay? Getting a lot by donations or just doing it voluntarily. It's a fantastic thing. So whatever you do, folks, keep pressing away. Keep pushing away, plug away, drive the mainstream media, and of course the CIA crazy. All right, hey, that's why those same newspapers, okay, like the Washington Post, they are hurting pretty damn hard right now. They are like on life support. So what goes around comes around, correct? Absolutely. All right, next one here came from the Free Thought Project, came out today by Baron Hines. It says here, former NIST employee speaks out, says Building 7 investigation bogus. Government denied evidence. Let's just read here because a former employee of the National Institute of Standards and Technology has stepped forward and criticized the government agency for ignoring the scientific errors found in its report on the collapsed World Trade Center Building 7 during the September 11, 2001 attacks. Peter Ketchum, who spent almost 15 years working at NIST, described how the flawed investigation methods were significantly different from the normal standards used by NIST. In a letter to the editor of the respected Europhysics news magazine, Ketchum's letter was published in the November 2016 issue and comes just months after the magazine's August 2016 report examining the Building 7 collapse in detail, which has been downloaded over 350,000 times according to the website. You got the links here, folks. Don't be shy to check it out yourselves, all right? Peter Ketchum was a contributor to numerous scientific papers during his 14-year as a part of the high-performance systems and service divisions and later the mathematical and computational sciences division. Ketchum wrote that he felt compelled to speak out about the NIST WTC7 investigation after reading a report for the first time in August 2016 and comparing the results with the conventional criticism from other professionals. The NIST report on the WTC7 was published in August 2008, more than 6 years after the attacks, and it concluded that the building collapsed after a structural failure due to fires caused by damages from debris when the Twin Towers collapsed earlier in the day. The root problem with the WTC Building 7 report is that NIST could not perform a definite study under common standards of the National Fire Protection Association because it lacked the evidence. You hear that? Lacked the evidence. Most of the structural steel was removed and melted down beginning within days after September 11th, and some beams were stolen as reported by Telegraph. NIST only had access to about 150 smaller pieces of steel called coupons cut from the whole section of structural steel beams. Due to lack of the remaining evidence, NIST instead generated computer models of the building structure to test collapse theory using stimulated fires to recreate the conditions prior to failure. The conclusion of the report have questioned for these reasons by thousands of physicists, engineers, and architects in the 15 years since the attack, as documented by the group Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, or AE911 for short. The inconclusive methods used for the report are what led Ketchum to speak out after watching documentaries which criticize the report's conclusions. He noted in this letter he was furious with himself for not knowing and also at NIST covering up the problems. How could I have worked at NIST all those years and not have noticed this before? Ketchum wrote. The NIST I knew was intellectually open, non-defensive, and willing to consider competing explanations. The more I investigated, the more apparent it became that NIST had reached a predetermined conclusion by ignoring, dismissing, and denying the evidence. Among the most egregious examples is the explanation for the collapse of WTC7 as an elaborate sequence of unlikely events culminating in the almost symmetrical total collapse of a steel frame building into its own footprint at free fall acceleration, Ketchum wrote. The main predetermined conclusion, which Ketchum refers to, is the theory created to explain why the 47-story building fell to the ground in about 12 seconds, which suggests the building suffered catastrophic failure in a short amount of time. NIST's WTC7 report concludes that fires led to the thermal expansion of long-span steel beams which support the floors, causing one beam on the 13th floor to fall off its seat. The report claims part of the 13th floor collapsed, triggering a chain reaction of floors failing around specific vertical support columns, which caused the building to fall on itself. See, it's like the way their side is addressing it's totally insane. So you know what, man? It's a total insult. All right, but I'm gonna continue on here. I know I'm digressing a little bit. The NIST used computer modeling to generate the experimental environment from Building 7's construction plans. However, professionals have criticized NIST because they have not released the models to the public for peer review. The models and methods have been questioned in many days. However, the initial cause of the collapse received the most scrutiny as researchers proved NIST did not accurately model the steel's connection at the stated point of initial failure. NIST left out multiple smaller designs elements shown in the construction plan, which would have built a stronger connection in the computer model. The resulting model simulation was released in a video by NIST. However, it shows the beam that failed is twisting in ways that are different from the physical properties of the steel's connection. Researchers have shown that the NIST theory is significantly different from the possible sequences based on the construction plans and video evidence for multiple reasons. NIST report on Building 7 has generated an increasing amount of controversy in academic circles and led to AE 911 funding a study using computer models, which is still ongoing at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks. Researchers and activists have also been working to investigate the inconsistent methods. Yes, because if you watch that video, Rebuilding America, the PBS video, I think like 15 chapters. Chapter 10, if I'm correct, talked about Building 7. Larry Silver's team made a statement. Hey, we lost a lot of lives this day. We lost a terrible loss of lives. And what are you going to do with Building 7? Pull it. When he said pull it, the buildings came down. But when you watch that before, they talk about pulling remains of 4, 5, and 6. So pull it means bring it down, okay? Any questions? Watch that video. Okay, Rebuilding America. You can probably go on YouTube or hit the library. Even if you live in Fort Lauderdale, the main library should have it. I've seen it. I checked it out, and I was like, wow. And still, at least this gentleman here is realizing he got had, he got swindled, he got screwed by this particular entity, and he has the courage to speak out, and you got to give this man the thumbs up. Thank you, Peter Ketchum, for putting your 2 cents in, man. And hey, let's give him a little round of applause. You know what I'm saying, my friends? That's right. He deserves it. He does. So, okay, next one here I'm going to check out. It's by EFF.org, which stands for Electronic Frontier Foundation. And it came out by Dave Mass and Aaron Mackey. Came out yesterday, to be exact. It says here, law enforcement's secret super search engine amasses trillions of phone records for decades. Hey, same old song and dance, right? Although the government still hides too much information about a secret telephone records surveillance program known as Hemisphere, we have learned through EFF's Freedom of Information Act lawsuits that police tout the massive database of private calls as Google on steroids, and there is a PDF format if people want to look at it. And I believe, how many pages is this thing? Oh, it's like, say 2 pages. Oh, that's cute. And so, Task Force Commander, Hemisphere Project, and all that good stuff. So we're gonna head back. Continue with the story. Hemisphere, which AT&T operates on behalf of federal, state, and local law enforcement, contains trillions of domestic and international phone call records dating back to 1987. AT&T adds roughly 4 billion phone records to Hemispheres each day, including phone calls from non-AT&T customers that pass through the company's switches. So I would say TracFone, Net10. I will continue on here. Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, and other federal, state, and local police use Hemisphere not to only track when and who someone is calling, but to perform complicated traffic analysis that can dynamically map people on social networks and physical locations. This even includes knowing when someone changes their phone number. And federal officials often do it without first getting permission from a judge. Indeed, Hemisphere was designed to be extremely secret, with police instructed to do everything possible to make sure the program never appeared in the public record. After using Hemisphere to obtain private information about someone, police usually cover up their use of Hemisphere by later obtaining targeted data about suspects from phone providers through traditional subpoenas, a process the police call the parallel construction, and that EFF calls evidence laundering. Absolutely, they're right on that. Government treats the same information differently in FOIA cases. Government secrecy about Hemisphere has extended to refusing to disclose basic records about the program, and EFF has had to sue federal and California law enforcement to win access to this critical information. EFF filed another round of briefing in federal court in November, calling on the government to provide records as soon as possible. Given that we made our FOIA request almost 2 years ago, delayed resolution in federal court has stalled a related lawsuit EFF brought against California law enforcement agencies for access to their records about Hemisphere. We aren't the only ones suing. The Electronic Privacy Information Center filed similar litigation, which has allowed us to learn even more about Hemisphere, including how the federal government has used inconsistent arguments to avoid public scrutiny of the program. In the EFS case, earlier this month, the government filed a list of Hemisphere records that government is withholding from both EFF and Epic. This list shows the government treated the two requesters differently. Specifically, the chart shows that out of the 161 pages common to both lawsuits, the government claimed more than twice as many legal reasons to withhold the majority of pages from EFF. The government withheld 151 pages from EFF, but not Epic, on the grounds that disclosure could interfere with an ongoing law enforcement investigation, and withheld 107 pages from EFF, but not Epic, because disclosure was supposedly out confidential informants. The government has yet to explain why it treated the exact same information so differently in EFF and Epic respective FOIA requests. Absent any explanation, the desperate treatment appears highly arbitrary. Moreover, it highlights the large power imbalance between the government and FOIA requesters seeking records. Agencies know exactly what documents contain and are in the best position to use or abuse FOIA's exemptions to withhold them. This asymmetry is often to the government's advantage. The government's inconsistent treatment of EFF's and EPIC's FOIA requests show why FOIA should better limit officials' discretion to treat requesters so differently and better ensure judicial oversight over the entire FOIA process. And there's a little thing on a link on the super engine right here. You can check it out yourselves. It goes the actual police view Hemisphere as a super search engine. Before the Hemisphere program came to light in 2013, when a presentation was inadvertently released to a privacy activist, the public knew nothing about the massive phone records dragnet. Through the program, AT&T assists federal and local law enforcement, often by station company staff and police fusion centers. Yeah, they're everywhere. There are a lot of places you can see where they're at, my friend. And access and analyzing AT&T's massive database of call detailed records, or CDRs. This information includes phone number dials and calls received, as well as the time, date, and length of the call, and sometimes location information. This information isn't limited to the AT&T customers either. From the record that have been disclosed in EFF lawsuits, we've learned that police view the astonishing size and scope of the database as an asset, referring to it as a super search engine and Google on steroids. Such descriptions confirm EFF's worst fears that Hemisphere is a mass surveillance program that threatens core civil liberties. The program poses severe Fourth Amendment concerns because police are obtaining detailed private information from the phone call records and learning even more about people's social connections and physical movements based on pattern analysis. Federal officials do all of this without a warrant or any judicial oversight. 1984. That's right, Brave New World. But beyond the Fourth Amendment problems, Hemisphere also poses acute risk to the First Amendment rights of callers caught in the program's dragnet. Specifically, Hemisphere allows police to see a person's association, shedding light on their personal connection and political and social networks. It's not hard to see such a tool being trained on activists and other critical law enforcement, or being used by the government to identify entire organizations. We know that law enforcement officials have subjected Black Lives Matter activists to automated social media monitoring and subjected attendees at gun shows to surveillance by automated license plate readers. Yeah, so if you go to a gun show, you got some ass wipe with a badge wants to do a read on your plate, and they say, oh, he lives over there, so we assume the firearms would be at that home. Government officials can easily use Hemisphere in similar ways. The Hemisphere program cannot operate without AT&T's full cooperation, and it's time for AT&T to reconsider its responsibility not only to its customers, but to all Americans who pick up the phone. And damn right, and I know one thing for sure, the workers at AT&T are represented by Communication Workers of America. You are being duped and being used, and you should stand up and go on strike with these scumbags. Or do a walkout, and I will back you up in that picket line. You won't be and I won't be the only one. This is totally insane and unacceptable. And people talk about, oh, you can't burn the American flag, you can't desecrate, but you got these clowns here are symbolically destroying the flag and what's it about. But that's okay, correct? So you folks better really look into those areas when talking about flag desecration. Symbolically, like I said before, you got clowns, treasonous clowns like them are doing the same thing. So, all right, enough of that little rant there. Next one actually came from Gunners of America. It's very interesting. It says, anti-gun activist David Petraeus under consideration for Secretary of State. And it says here, the email address is being protected from spam bots. You don't need that. Please contact President-elect Donald Trump at this email address. Is being protected. Okay, tells you where it's at. Give the whole email address. It says here, dear friend of the Second Amendment, anti-gun activist David Petraeus is under consideration for the position of the Secretary of State in the Trump administration. Although Petraeus seldom speaks publicly on domestic issues, he hates guns so much that he teamed up with anti-gun leader Mark Kelly and his wife Gabriel Giffords to co-found Veterans Coalition for Common Sense, an anti-gun organization devoted to doing more to prevent gun tragedies by urging lawmakers to toughen gun laws. Not surprisingly, leftist media has elated that a gun hater like Petraeus might be awarded the top cabinet post by Trump. This is true even though Petraeus in November 2012 resigned as CIA director and pleaded guilty to leaking classified information to a biographer with whom he was having an extramarital affair. And if I remember, he was part of the whole, he was involved with Bilderberg as well, right? He was involved with the Bilderberg group. Yeah, bend over Bob to the New World Order. That's right, the Petraeus way, the Petraeus way. Spread my butt you to get in advance, the Petraeus way. Okay, a little more sarcasm on that. I will continue on here, but Petraeus, Clinton-like disregard for American security is least of his problems. As Secretary of State, Petraeus will play a key role in deciding whether to remove the U.S. from the UN Arms Trade Treaty, UNATT, This agreement would mandate gun registration and would authorize comprehensive gun bans, all goals supported by Petraeus colleagues Kelly and Giffords. Petraeus would effectively decide whether to push for the ratification of the anti-gun UN's small arms treaties. Finally, Petraeus would have jurisdiction over the International Trade, or ITAR regulations. Under Clinton Kerry guidance, these regulations have been expanded to outlaw gunsmithing. So I can't fix my own. You can't fix firearms. What kind of garbage is that, right? In addition, a gun technician who communicates the how-to information about guns on the internet without purchasing a $2,250 State Department license could be prosecuted and imprisoned. So that's a victimless crime law. This is how manly Petraeus is. And carrying all these other butt lugs, New World Order butt lugs, okay? And we'll continue on here. If any gun Petraeus is nominated and confirmed, we can expect these policies to be continued and expanded. Donald Trump was elected with the broad support of members of the Second Amendment community. We believe it would be a huge mistake to begin his transition by putting an anti-gun activist in a position whether he could regulate and ban guns. Sincerely, Tim Macy. And what you can do, there's a copy and paste this letter, and you can send this email, and you can put your name, you can put other stuff on there, and you know what? I think this fool needs to get struck down. And these other pathetic, treasonous quacks as well, including Mark Kelly and Gabriel Giffords. And don't get me wrong, what happened there was horrendous, but in my personal view, I believe Judge Rowley was the primary target. So he's the one who said the Brady Law was unconstitutional. Sheriff Prince Mack versus the United States of America. So as far as I'm concerned, petition against this bastard, send it to President Trump, say no to this treasonous quack, bend over Bob to the New World Order. Petraeus is nothing more than a global Uncle Tom. End of story. Spread this word, petition, and make this thing happen. All right, my friends? And if you're going to be a member of Guns of America, I recommend it. Even though they may be part of some other organization, but the main topic, they have been compromising. Like I said, I've been a lifetime member for a good 12, 13 years now. I get a lot of good information, and I share it with everybody else. All right, finally, that will be the last one. It came from the blog, 10thamendmentcenter.com by Mike Meharry. It came out yesterday. It says here, permission not required. Constitutional carry bill introduced in Texas. Constitutional carry bill filed for the 2017 legislative session will make it legal for Texans to carry a concealed firearm without a license and foster an environment hostile to federal gun control. Representative Jonathan Strickland, Republican from Bedford, filed House Bill 375 on November 16th. If passed into law, it would end Texas concealed carry licensing requirements and remove the need for government permission to carry a concealed firearm in the state. The new law reads in part, notwithstanding with any other law to the contrary, a person who is not otherwise prohibited by law from possessing a firearm shall not be required to obtain a license to carry a handgun as a condition for carrying a handgun. The legislation also provides legal protection for unreasonable police interference for those carrying a concealed weapon. The mere possession or carrying of a handgun openly or concealed with or without a license issued under the subchapter shall not constitute reasonable belief for a peace officer to disarm or detain an otherwise law-abiding person. Constitutional carry is a big step toward being able to exercise a natural right that has been infringed at all levels for far too long. Shall not.org policy lead Scott Lander said. While constitutional carry bills do not directly affect federal gun control, widespread passage of permitless concealed carry laws in states subtly undermines federal efforts to regulate guns, as we've seen with marijuana and industrialized hemp. A federal regulation becomes ineffective when states ignore it and pass laws encouraging the prohibited activity anyway. The federal government lacks the enforcement power necessary to obtain its ban, and people are willing to take it on the small risk of federal sanctions if they know the state will not interfere. This increases when the state actively encourages the market. Less restrictive state gun laws will likely have a similar impact on federal gun laws It will make it that much more difficult for the feds to enforce any federal gun control law and increase the likelihood that states with few limits will simply refuse to cooperate with federal government enforcement efforts. The action's passage of HB 375 will lower barriers for those wanting to the option of defending themselves with firearms and encourage a gun-friendly environment that will make federal efforts to limit firearms that much more difficult. And I gotta give these guys, I gotta give them a thumbs up on it. It is fantastic. But like I tell everyone, doesn't mean you should not learn, you should not stop training, education, and all that. I'm not the only one, but a lot of pro firearm websites say if you carry a firearm, you have a higher standard. Firearm safety, like everything else, equipment safety is everyone's responsibility. So, folks, if you're gonna carry something that haven't used, learn it, practice it, take it to the range. There's instructors out there that are willing to teach you this. So that will be key. The more educated, the better you'll be. And remember, and never stop learning. Always practice, practice, practice. And you know what? I am thrilled. I am excited. This is happening because it was driving the ATF crazy. You know what? I think is beautiful. All right, my friends, that is all for now. I'd like to thank everyone for listening to this show. Plus, feel free to download and share this information or episode throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or you got something interesting that I may want to check out, whatever you do, please send your correspondences with decorum. You can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Tumblr, YouTube, Freedoms Network, and Scene.life. Or you can email me at LokiLuck3, which is Loki Luck and the number 3 all together at gmail.com. So I'm not going to be playing any music at this time, but it depends what mood I'm in. I'm just wanting to do a little hit and run. And so enjoying myself. And hopefully everyone have a great December season. Shop wisely. All right, folks? Okay, my friends. Once again, thank you for your time. But always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.